The bank manager's voice was so quiet I almost missed it. "Ma'am, you need to check the ownership records." We were standing behind a tall fern near the ballroom hallway. My husband's laughter floated over the music like nothing in the world was wrong. I gave a small, polite laugh. "Oh, I'm sure it's fine," I said. "My husband handles that." Daniel Reeves didn't smile. He looked past my shoulder like he was making sure no one was watching. "You should see this," he said. He opened a file on his tablet. A list of assets scrolled into view: our house, the lake cabin we use twice a year, the company, a brokerage account, a trust. I leaned closer, still half amused. Then my stomach dropped. My name wasn't on anything, not next to his, not underneath, not even as a secondary line. I blinked once hard like it would change. It didn't. Daniel's finger hovered at the edge of the screen. "I'm sorry," he said, and his voice sounded careful. "But you need to know." I didn't speak. I felt my face hold its shape the way it does in photos, the way women learn to keep their expression presentable. From across the room, my husband lifted his glass in the middle of his speech. "To 20 years," he called. "To my wife who believed in me." Applause rose. I heard it like it was coming from a different building. Now let me rewind. Because the night didn't start with fear. It started with curling my hair in our bathroom mirror. It started with a navy dress I hadn't worn in years. It started with my daughter texting, "So proud of you, Mom. You two made it." It started with me believing that made it meant something shared. We live in a suburb outside Raleigh, a quiet street with mailboxes that lean a little in summer heat, a neighborhood where people wave then go back inside. I spent most of my adult life in that rhythm. I raised 2 kids. I ran carpools. I organized church potlucks. I kept a family calendar like it was a second job. My husband Mark started his small logistics firm when the kids were toddlers. I was the one who stayed home. Not because he forced me, because we decided together that it made sense. That's what I told myself for years. He would say things like, "You're the reason I can focus." And I believed him. At 20 years, you don't count the small trades anymore. You just call it partnership. The anniversary party was Mark's idea. He didn't do big gestures often. So when he said he wanted to celebrate properly, I felt a warm kind of surprise. He rented the country club ballroom, not fancy, but nice. White tablecloths, a DJ playing old Motown, a photo slideshow in the corner. Our kids flew in for the weekend, our pastor came, a few of Mark's business friends came too. Men in sport coats who shook my hand and called me the backbone. Women in heels who asked what it felt like to be married to a builder. I smiled through it all. I knew how to host. Hosting is a skill you develop when you spend years keeping the temperature of a room comfortable. At one point, my friend Nancy from church squeezed my arm. "You look beautiful," she whispered. "Thank you," I said. "Mark's been talking about you all week," she added. "Like he's trying to impress you again." I laughed softly. "It's probably the milestone," I said. Nancy's eyes warmed. "You deserve it," she said, and then she drifted away. The first small flicker of unease came when Mark introduced me to a man I didn't recognize. "Claire, this is Daniel Reeves," Mark said. "He's the bank manager, takes care of our accounts." Daniel shook my hand. His grip was firm, but his eyes didn't settle. He looked tense, like he'd stepped into the wrong room. "Nice to meet you," I said. He nodded. "Likewise." Mark slapped Daniel lightly on the shoulder. "Daniel's the reason we got that credit line approved fast," Mark said, smiling. Daniel's mouth tightened. "It was a team process," Daniel replied. Mark laughed and moved on. Daniel stayed still for half a beat, then followed. I watched him go, and I told myself I was imagining things. People get awkward at parties. I returned to my table. Our kids were laughing with my sister. Mark's mother was telling a long story about the early years. I looked around that room and felt briefly proud, not of the money, of the endurance, of the fact that we had stayed. Then Mark went up to the microphone. He tapped it once. Everybody, he said, and the room quieted. He looked confident under the lights. Not cruel, not dramatic, just sure of himself. 20 years, he said. That's not nothing. People chuckled. He raised his glass. I want to thank my wife, he continued, for believing in me when I had nothing. There it was, that familiar story. Him as the one who built. Me as the one who believed. It sounded sweet in public, but as he spoke, something in me shifted. Because belief is not nothing. Belief is labor. Belief is risk. Belief is unpaid. I swallowed it down and smiled anyway. He went on about long nights, about hard work, about faith. He didn't mention the years I stretched grocery money. He didn't mention my old job I left behind. He didn't mention the way I learned to be low maintenance so he could be high performance. No one expects that in a toast. Still, I noticed. Applause rose. Mark stepped down and moved through the crowd like a man collecting congratulations. That's when Daniel appeared beside me again. "Mrs. Collins," he asked. "Claire," I said automatically. He nodded once. "Claire?" he repeated. "Could I speak with you privately?" I glanced toward Mark. He was laughing with two men near the bar. One of them patted his back like Mark had just won something. I turned back to Daniel. "Sure," I said. He led me toward the hallway away from the music. Behind a tall plant, he stopped and lowered his voice. "Ma'am, you need to check the ownership records." I laughed because the word sounded absurd in that moment. "My husband handles that," I said. Daniel didn't move. He didn't mirror my laugh. His face held that uncomfortable professional restraint. "You should see this," he said. Then the file. Then the list. Then the blank space where my name should have been. I didn't know what my face did. I only knew I kept it together. I didn't gasp. I didn't ask him to repeat it. I stared at the screen like it was a foreign language. "This can't be right," I said quietly. Daniel's eyes softened. "It's right," he replied. "It's been this way for years." For years, I repeated, and it sounded like a question. He nodded. "I'm not here to cause problems," he added. "But you deserve to know." "Why are you telling me now?" I asked. His jaw tightened like he'd been holding this in. "Because something came across my desk last week," he said, "and it involved an update that would make it even harder to change later." My throat went dry. An update to what Daniel hesitated. Then he said carefully, "A trust." I heard the music from the ballroom again, a slow song, couples laughing, someone clinking a glass, all normal, all false suddenly. I handed the tablet back with steady hands. I could feel my pulse in my fingertips. I forced my voice to stay low. "I need to return to my guests," I said. Daniel nodded. "Of course," he said. "But please, don't ignore this." I walked back into the ballroom. Mark saw me and lifted his glass again. He mouthed, "You okay?" I smiled and nodded. I didn't answer. Then I sat down at our table and folded my napkin neatly in my lap. Because that's what women do when their world tilts. They keep the table nice. But inside, something had changed. I wasn't just a wife at a party anymore. I was a person who had just discovered she wasn't legally real in her own life. And I knew one thing with sudden clarity. If my name wasn't on anything, then my safety wasn't either. I looked across the room at Mark. He was charming, relaxed, like nothing could touch him. I watched him the way you watch a man you thought you knew. And I realized I didn't even know where to start. But I knew who would. Daniel. The bank manager with the uncomfortable face. Because he didn't pull me aside to be kind. He pulled me aside because something was coming. The music kept playing long after the truth settled in. I moved through the rest of the evening like I was underwater, smiling, thanking people, cutting cake beside a man I suddenly saw from a distance. Mark kept touching my back as he passed. Light, casual, possessive in a way I had never questioned before. When the party finally ended, our daughter hugged me tight. 20 years, she said. That's amazing, Mom. I held her a little longer than usual. Go get some sleep, I told her. You've got an early flight. Mark was still energized when we got home. He loosened his tie in the kitchen and poured himself a drink. That went well, he said. Don't you think I set my purse down carefully? Yes, I replied. He watched me for a second. You're quiet. I'm tired. He nodded, satisfied with that answer. We should do something bigger at 25, he said. Maybe Napa. I looked at him. He had already moved forward in his head. I almost asked him right there, about the house, about the company, about the trust. Instead, I said nothing. Not because I was afraid, because I wanted facts before I had a conversation. That was new for me. I used to process feelings first. That night I lay awake beside him. His breathing was even, untroubled. I stared at the ceiling and replayed Daniel's words. It's been this way for years. Years. How many forms had I signed without reading closely? How many times had I said, "You handle it"? In the morning, Mark left early. He kissed my forehead like always. "Love you," he said. "Love you," I replied. The words felt intact, but something underneath them had shifted. At 10 o'clock, I drove to the bank, the same branch we've used since the kids were in elementary school. Brick building, flag out front. Inside, the carpet smelled faintly like coffee. Daniel met me in a small conference room. No tablet this time. Printed documents, neatly stacked. He didn't waste time. I didn't sleep well after last night, he said quietly. I didn't either, I answered. He slid the first page toward me. Property deed, our home, owner Mark Collins. Only, no joint tenancy, I asked. He shook his head. No, I flipped to the next. Lake cabin. Same. Then the business entity, LLC documents, managing member Mark Collins. I searched the page for my name. Nothing. Am I at least listed somewhere, I asked. As authorized viewer on one brokerage account, he said. No decision authority. I sat back in the chair. I didn't feel like crying. I felt foolish. Daniel watched me carefully. I want to be clear, he said. This isn't illegal. It's structured. Structured, I repeated. He nodded. There are reasons people do this, he continued. Liability protection, estate planning, control. The word hung in the air. Why tell me, I asked again. His jaw tightened slightly. Because last week your husband requested amendments to a revocable trust. My stomach turned. What kind of amendments? He paused. In the event of incapacity, primary decision-making authority would transfer to a co-trustee, who I asked. He hesitated just long enough for it to hurt. His business partner. I blinked. Not me, not our daughter, not our son, his business partner. I let that settle. If something happened to him tomorrow, I said slowly, I would not control our own home. That is correct. And this has been in place for years. Yes. I folded my hands together. They were steady. I thought we owned everything together, I said. Daniel didn't rush to fill the silence. Finally, he said, a lot of couples assume that. Assume. I had built my adult life on assumption. That afternoon, I met Nancy for coffee. She noticed immediately that something was off. You look like you didn't sleep, she said. I didn't. We sat by the window, sunlight across the table. Ordinary. I debated how much to say. Then I told her. Not every detail, just enough. She went very quiet. Are you saying, none of it is yours? She asked. Legally, I said, it appears not. Nancy leaned back slowly. But you gave up your job, she said. For the kids. For him. I did. And he knows that. I think he thinks that's different. Nancy's eyes sharpened. Different how, like emotional contribution and legal ownership are separate categories. She stared at me. That doesn't sound like partnership, she said. It didn't. That night at dinner, I tested something small. Mark was telling a story about a potential expansion. I waited for him to finish. Can we look at the trust documents together sometime, I asked casually. He paused. Just a fraction too long. Why, he asked. I'd like to understand them. He smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. It's boring stuff, he said. You don't need to worry about that. I'm not worried, I replied. I just want to see. He picked up his fork again. It's set up to protect you, he said. From what I asked. He didn't answer directly. It's cleaner this way, he said instead. Cleaner. As if I was a complication. I felt something tighten in my chest. Not anger. Clarity. Later that night, I overheard him on the phone in his office. The door was slightly open. I've got it handled, he said. She's not involved in the financial side. A pause. She doesn't really get into numbers. He chuckled softly. She's happier that way. I stood in the hallway. He wasn't being cruel. He was being certain. Certain that I didn't belong in that conversation. Certain that he knew what was best. That was harder to confront than open disrespect. Because it sounded like love. But it wasn't equality. The next morning I emailed Daniel. I asked for copies of every document connected to our assets. He responded within the hour. Professional, efficient, no judgment in his tone, just information. And at the bottom of the email, one line. There is still time to restructure. Time. I looked around my kitchen, the family calendar, the photos on the fridge, the life I thought was shared. And for the first time in 20 years, I didn't feel like a partner. I felt like a guest, a well-cared-for guest, but still a guest. I closed my laptop and picked up my phone. If there was still time, then I wasn't going to wait for him to invite me into my own life. The first time I realized how small I had made myself was at my own dinner table. Mark was explaining a new warehouse lease. He used numbers easily, confident, fluid. Our daughter Emma leaned forward. So how does that affect equity? She asked. Mark smiled at her. Good question, he said. He drew a quick diagram on a napkin. I watched his hand move. Emma nodded. That makes sense, she said. Then she turned to me. Mom, are you on the board? The question wasn't loaded. It was curious. I opened my mouth, closed it. I'm not sure I said. Emma blinked. You don't know. Mark laughed lightly. Your mom prefers not to deal with all that he said. It sounded harmless. It always sounded harmless. I didn't correct him. That was my first mistake. Later that night after the kids had gone out, I stood in the doorway of his office. He was reviewing something on his laptop. Can we talk? I asked. He looked up. Of course. I stepped inside. I didn't sit. I met with Daniel, I said. His expression shifted just slightly. Why, he asked me to come in. For what? To review ownership records. He leaned back in his chair. And my name isn't on anything. He exhaled slowly. It's structured for liability, he said. We've talked about this. We haven't, I replied. He rubbed his temple. Claire, it's just paperwork. It's the house. It's protected. From me, he frowned. From risk. I'm a risk. He stood up then. You're twisting this. I'm asking a question. His jaw tightened. You've never wanted to be involved in that side, he said. You said it stressed you out. I searched my memory. I had said that once, when the kids were small, when I was exhausted. I had said, I trust you. Just handle it. Trust is efficient. It saves time. It also transfers power. That was 10 years ago, I said quietly. And nothing has changed, he replied. That sentence landed harder than he intended. Nothing has changed. Not my understanding, not my role, not my access. Why am I not co-trustee, I asked. He hesitated. It complicates things. How he looked away. It just does. I didn't push further. Not because I didn't want answers. Because I realized something. He wasn't hiding from me. He genuinely believed I didn't need to know. That belief was the problem. The next afternoon I went back to the bank. Daniel looked up when I walked in. "You're back," he said. "Yes." I closed the conference room door myself this time. "I need to understand something I said." He nodded. "Ask. When couples structure assets this way, is it common for one spouse not to be listed anywhere?" He chose his words carefully. It's not uncommon when one spouse manages the business side. Does it usually reflect mutual agreement? Sometimes, and other times he held my gaze. Other times it reflects habit. Habit. I let that sink in. "I think my husband believes he's protecting me," I said. Daniel didn't respond immediately. "Protection without participation can feel like exclusion," he said finally. That was the first time he spoke in something other than technical language. "You thought I was naive," I said. He shook his head. "No, I thought you were uninformed. There was a difference." "And that bothered you?" I asked. He hesitated. "Yes, I didn't expect that." "Why?" "Because when something happens, he said it's usually the uninformed spouse who's blindsided." Blindsided. The word felt accurate. On the drive home, I didn't turn on the radio. I thought about the early years, when Mark and I sat at the kitchen table with bills spread out, when we talked about everything. Somewhere along the way, those conversations narrowed. He took on more, I took on more, different kinds. His became visible, mine became routine. Routine disappears. That evening, Emma stopped by before her flight. She hugged me in the doorway. "Mom," she said softly, "can I ask you something?" "Of course. Are you happy?" The question startled me. "Why would you ask that?" She shrugged slightly. "Dad talks about the company like it's his life. I just wonder where you fit in." I smiled faintly. "I fit in here," I said. She looked unconvinced. "You used to love marketing," she said. "You were so good at it." "I still am," I replied quietly. "So why did you stop?" "Because someone had to. Because it made sense. Because it was temporary. Because I thought we were building something together." "I don't know," I said instead. After she left, I sat at the kitchen counter alone. Mark came home later than usual. He loosened his tie and poured himself water. "You're quiet again," he said. "I'm thinking." "About what?" "About the difference between protection and control." He stopped mid-sip. "I don't control you," he said. "I didn't say you did. That's what you're implying. I'm asking to be included." "You are included," he replied quickly. "In what?" He hesitated. "In the life we've built. That's not the same as being included in decisions." He stared at me. "You've never asked before," he said. "I didn't know I had to." Silence stretched between us. For a moment I saw something flicker in his expression. Not anger, confusion. As if I had stepped outside a script he didn't realize we were following. "You don't trust me," he said quietly. I considered that. "I do," I replied. "But trust without visibility isn't partnership." He looked away. That was new. He always held eye contact when he felt sure. "I'll show you the documents," he said finally. "When soon." Soon is a soft word. It stretches. The next morning I signed up for a community college evening course, Personal Finance and Estate Basics, 8 weeks, Tuesdays at 7. I didn't tell Mark, not because I wanted to hide it, because I wanted something that was mine. When I received the confirmation email, I felt a small, steadying shift. Knowledge is quiet power, and I had been quiet long enough. The trust amendment meeting was scheduled for a Thursday afternoon. Mark told me about it at breakfast. Quick stop at the bank, he said. Just paperwork. Should I come? I asked. He hesitated. It's not necessary. I'd like to. He studied me for a moment. Then he nodded. Fine. We drove together. The air inside the car felt controlled. Not tense. Controlled. Mark talked about a vendor issue on the way. I listened. I watched the way his hands gripped the steering wheel when he merged. He wasn't nervous. He was certain. Daniel met us in the same conference room. The documents were laid out neatly. No drama, no secrecy, just ink and signatures. Thank you both for coming, Daniel said. His tone was neutral, professional. Mark sat down and reached for the first page. I leaned slightly forward. What's being updated? I asked. Minor trustee clarification, Mark said quickly. Daniel glanced at him, then at me. It formalizes succession structure, Daniel added. Succession to what I asked. Mark exhaled softly. It's standard. Standard for who silence. Daniel cleared his throat. In the event of incapacity, he said carefully, primary operational authority would transfer to the co-trustee. I waited. And who is that, I asked. Mark answered before Daniel could. Jason, he said. Jason, his business partner, not me, not our daughter, not our son. Jason. I felt the room narrow. If something happened to you, I said slowly, Jason would control the company. Yes, Mark replied. Temporarily. And the house. It's in the trust, he said, so Jason would control that too. It's not about control, Mark said, irritation edging in. It's about continuity, continuity for who I asked. He looked at me like I was being unreasonable. For the business. I turned to Daniel, and my role, Daniel's expression, was tight. You are listed as beneficiary, he said. Beneficiary. Not trustee, not decision-maker, recipient. So I would be taken care of, I said quietly. Yes, Mark said, relieved at that phrasing. Exactly. Taken care of. The phrase landed heavier than any legal term. I don't want to be taken care of, I said. Mark blinked. What I want to be involved. He leaned back in his chair. Claire, this is complicated. I'm not incapable. That's not what I'm saying. It's what the documents say. Daniel remained silent. The air in the room felt thick. Mark picked up his pen. This is about protecting you, he insisted. From what I asked again. He didn't answer. Instead, he signed. Ink on paper. Smooth. Certain. Daniel slid the pages toward me. You are not required to sign, he said. Not required. The words echoed. I looked at the line where Jason's name appeared. Neat, clear, present. Then I looked at the blank space where mine could have been. I didn't sign anything, because there was nothing for me to sign. We drove home in silence. Mark kept both hands on the wheel. You're overreacting, he said finally. I asked one question. You're turning this into something it's not. What is it then? It's planning. For a future where I don't lead, I said. He tightened his jaw. You've never shown interest in leading. I turned toward him. Did you ever invite me silence? That was the moment. Not explosive. Not dramatic. Just a crack in something foundational. That night I went to my first class. A small classroom at the community college. 15 folding desks. Fluorescent lights. Women and men in their 40s, 50s, 60s. Some divorced, some widowed, some just curious. The instructor, a woman in her early 50s, wrote 3 words on the board: ownership, access, authority. People confuse these, she said. Ownership is legal title. Access is visibility. Authority is decision power. I felt my chest tighten. I had access. Limited. I did not have ownership, and I certainly did not have authority. After class, a woman named Denise introduced herself. First time she asked. Yes, me too, she said. My husband handled everything for 30 years. Then he got sick. Her voice didn't shake. But I didn't know where anything was. She continued. I won't be that unprepared again. We exchanged numbers. On the drive home, I didn't feel angry. I felt awake. Mark was sitting at the kitchen table when I walked in. Where were you? He asked. Class. What class? Personal finance. He stared at me. For what to understand? He leaned back slowly. You don't need that. I do. Why? Because I'm not a beneficiary. The word hung between us. He stood up. You think I'm trying to cut you out? I think you never put me in. He ran a hand through his hair. I thought handling everything was loving you. That's the problem, I said quietly. He at the bank, at dinner, in the hallway. I at the bank, at dinner, in the hallway. I didn't mean to make you feel small, he said. I don't think you meant to, I replied. But you did. He sat down again. For the first time since this started, he looked uncertain. Not defensive. Uncertain. What do you want? He asked. I want my name where it belongs. And where is that next to yours? Silence settled. Not hostile. Heavy. I went upstairs to change. When I came back down, he was still sitting there, staring at the table. He didn't look like a villain. He looked like a man who had built something and never questioned who stood outside the blueprint. The next morning, Daniel emailed. A short message. There are restructuring options available if requested. For the first time in 20 years, I wasn't waiting to be invited. I was preparing to ask. The second class felt different. I wasn't the quiet one in the back anymore. I asked questions. Specific ones. What's the difference between co-trustee and successor trustee? What happens if a business partner is listed before a spouse? The instructor answered without drama. Denise nudged my arm once. You're serious, she whispered. Yes, I said. For the first time in a long time, I was. When I got home that night, Mark was in the kitchen. No laptop, no phone in his hand. Just him. I've been thinking, he said. That's good, I replied gently. He didn't smile. I didn't realize you felt excluded. I didn't realize I was, I said. He pulled out a chair for me. That small gesture felt unfamiliar. I grew up watching my dad handle everything he said. My mom never asked. I'm not your mom, I said quietly. I know. He leaned forward. I thought I was reducing stress for you. By removing me from decisions, I thought you trusted me. I did, I said. Trust isn't the same as silence. He looked down at his hands. You gave up your job for us, he said. Yes. I always meant to make that worth it. It would have been worth it if I was included. That landed. He inhaled slowly. I don't think I understood the difference. Between being cared for and being respected. Between protection and partnership. Between assuming and asking. The next afternoon he called Daniel. On speaker. Daniel, he said, what would it take to restructure the trust to include Claire as co-trustee? There was a pause on the other end. Documentation and formal amendment, Daniel replied calmly. It's possible. Mark nodded, even though Daniel couldn't see it. Then we'll do that, he said. I didn't speak. I watched him. He wasn't defensive. He wasn't irritated. He looked unsettled, as if he had just realized something about himself. After the call, he sat back. Why didn't you say something years ago, he asked. I held his gaze. Why didn't you ask silence? That silence was honest, not angry, honest. A few days later, we met Daniel again. Same room, same table, different tone. This time my name appeared on draft documents, not as beneficiary, as co-trustee, Joint property title, revised LLC structure reflecting shared oversight. Daniel looked at me directly. Please review carefully, he said. I did. Line by line. Mark watched me. Not impatient. Curious. Anything unclear? Daniel asked. I pointed to one clause. What triggers authority transfer here? Daniel explained. I nodded. I'd like it modified slightly, I said. Mark glanced at me, then at Daniel. Can that be adjusted? He asked. Yes, Daniel replied. Mark didn't argue. He didn't override. He didn't say, it's fine. He waited. That waiting mattered. When I signed, my hand felt steady, not triumphant, present. Afterward, we walked to the parking lot together. Mark unlocked the car but didn't get in immediately. I'm embarrassed, he said. About what? That I thought I was being generous. I considered that. You were being efficient, I said. That's worse. He looked at me. I never saw you as less. You just didn't see me at all, I replied gently. He nodded once. That was the closest he'd come to admitting it. At dinner that night, Emma joined us over video call. Guess what Mark said? We updated the trust, I added. Emma blinked. You did, yes, Mark said. Your mom's co-trustee now. Emma smiled. Good. She didn't celebrate. She didn't dramatize it. She simply accepted it as normal. That told me something about generational expectations. Later, when the call ended, Mark leaned back. I don't want you to ever feel invisible again, he said. Inclusion isn't a feeling, I replied softly. It's a structure. He nodded slowly. I'm learning. So was I. Not about money, about myself. About the way I had slowly stepped out of rooms without noticing. About the way comfort can become confinement. The next week I kept going to class. Not because I needed to anymore. Because I wanted to. Denise and I stayed after one evening. You look different, she said. How more solid. I smiled. I am. At home, small things changed. Mark started forwarding me full financial reports. Not summaries, full reports. We scheduled monthly review meetings at the kitchen table. Not dramatic, just deliberate. The first time we did that, he handed me a folder. Walk me through what you see, he said. I did. He listened. Not to correct, to understand. That was new. Daniel emailed once more after everything was filed. All documents updated and recorded, he wrote. You now hold joint authority. I read the line twice. Joint authority. Not because I wanted power, because I wanted presence. One evening as we sat on the back porch, Mark spoke quietly. I didn't realize how much of your world shrank when you stayed home, he said. It didn't shrink, I replied. It shifted. And I didn't shift with you. Number. He nodded. I thought being the provider meant leading. It means sharing, I said. He leaned back in his chair. I'm glad you asked, he said. I'm glad I stopped waiting. We sat there in the fading light. Not perfect, not rewritten, but rebalanced. And for the first time in 20 years, my name wasn't just spoken in a toast. It was written. The first monthly review felt awkward. Not hostile, just unfamiliar. Mark spread the financial statements across the kitchen table like he used to do alone. This time he slid half the stack toward me. Start wherever you want, he said. I noticed his hands. They weren't tense, but they weren't relaxed either. I picked up the quarterly summary. Revenue projections, operating expenses, debt exposure. I read slowly, not pretending to understand. Actually scalable. He paused. Yes, he said, carefully scalable. He paused. Yes, he said carefully. It should be. Should. The word used to pass unnoticed. Now I circled it gently. What's the backup plan if it isn't? I asked. He looked at me differently. Not as someone intruding. As someone participating. I hadn't mapped that yet, he admitted. We sat with that. Then he said, "Help me." It wasn't dramatic, it was quiet. But it shifted something deep. That evening after we finished, he didn't rush upstairs. He stayed at the table. "You know," he said, staring at the papers, "I never thought you weren't capable." "I know," I replied. "I just thought you didn't care about this stuff." "I cared about us," I said. He nodded slowly. "I equated business with responsibility," he said, "and home with support. And those aren't the same thing." "No." A few days later, Nancy came over for coffee. She sat at the island and looked around. "You feel different," she said. "How, like you're standing straighter?" I smiled. "I am." She leaned forward. "So what happened?" I told her the short version. The trust, the conversation, the restructure. Nancy listened carefully. "He didn't mean to cut you out?" she asked. "No," I said. "That almost makes it worse." I thought about that. Maybe I replied. "But it also means he can change." Nancy stirred her coffee. "And if he hadn't," I met her eyes. "Then I would have." That answer surprised even me. Later that week, Mark invited me to a meeting at the office. "Just sit in," he said. "It's informal." The office felt smaller than I remembered. Jason was there. He stood when I entered. "Claire," he said, polite but cautious. I nodded. "Jason." The meeting started. Numbers, projections, operational updates. Halfway through, Jason referenced a decision. "I'll finalize that under the trust authority," he said. Mark cleared his throat. "Actually," he said, "Claire and I are co-trustees now." The room shifted. Not dramatically, subtly. Jason blinked once. "Oh," he said, "I didn't realize." "That's on me," Mark replied. Not defensive, not embarrassed, just direct. Jason nodded slowly. "Good," he said. And then he looked at me. "Would you like a copy of the updated projections?" "Yes," I said. No hesitation, no apology. After the meeting, as we walked to the car, Mark exhaled. "That felt strange," he admitted. "What part?" Saying it out loud. "That I'm involved." "Yes." I glanced at him. "Strange isn't bad," I said. He nodded. "I think I got used to being the sole decision-maker." "That's comfortable." Too comfortable. The following Tuesday in class, we discussed long-term estate planning. Denise turned to me. "You look calm," she said. "I am." "You staying in the class?" "Yes. Even though you fixed it, it's not just about fixing," I replied. She smiled. "Good." That night, Mark found my notebook on the counter. He flipped through it. Ownership, access, authority, he read aloud. He looked at me. "That's what this was about, wasn't it?" "Yes." "I gave you access," he said slowly. "But not authority." I nodded. "And I never questioned it," he added. "Neither did I said. We both sat with that. The fault wasn't singular. It was structural, built on assumptions, on habits, on roles we inherited without inspection. A week later, our son visited. He sat on the porch with Mark while I brought out lemonade. I heard about the restructure, he said casually. Mark glanced at me. "News travels?" he muttered. Our son shrugged. "It makes sense," he said. "Mom built this life too." There was no debate in his tone, just certainty. Mark looked thoughtful. "I guess I never framed it that way," he said. "You should," our son replied. After he left, Mark turned to me. "Did you tell them?" he asked. "No," I said. "You did?" He laughed softly. "Apparently." That evening, as we prepared dinner together, he paused at the stove. "I need to say something," he said. I waited. "I'm sorry," he said quietly. "For what?" For assuming leadership meant control. For assuming love meant provision. For assuming you were fine not knowing. He didn't rush it. He didn't defend himself. He simply stood there and said it. "I forgive you," I replied. Not because he demanded it, because he understood it. Later that night, as we cleaned up, He reached for my hand. "Thank you for not leaving," he said. I looked at him carefully. "I didn't stay for the money," I said. "I know. I stayed because you listened." That mattered. We aren't a different couple now. We aren't perfect. We still disagree. But something fundamental shifted. I am not outside the blueprint anymore. I am on it. And he knows it. The next month when the statements arrived, he placed them on the table without comment. I opened them, reviewed them, signed where required. Not because I had to, because I belonged there. And for the first time in 20 years, belonging didn't depend on trust alone. It depended on structure. The anniversary photo still hangs in our hallway. White tablecloths, string lights, Mark's arm around my waist, my smile steady. Most people who see it assume that was the night we celebrated success. They don't know it was the night I learned I didn't legally exist in my own life. A year has passed since then. Not a dramatic year, a steady one. The kind that changes you quietly. Every first Monday of the month, Mark and I sit at the kitchen table. Coffee, statements, spreadsheets. We take turns leading the conversation. Sometimes he starts. Sometimes I do. There's no announcement about it, no ceremony, just routine. And routine is powerful. Last week I caught myself explaining a tax adjustment to him. He listened. Actually listened. Not because he had to, because he respected the perspective. Afterward he smiled. "I used to think you didn't care about this," he said. "I cared about us," I replied. "And now I care about both." He nodded slowly. The shift between us isn't loud. It's visible in small moments. He forwards me meeting agendas without being asked. He pauses before signing documents and asks, "Have you read it?" And I have. I still go to class on Tuesdays. The course ended months ago, but I enrolled in the advanced session. Not because I'm afraid, because I like understanding. Denise and I grabbed coffee afterward. She finalized her own trust restructure last month. "You started something she told me once." "No," I said. "I just asked." She laughed. That's how it starts. At church, Nancy asked me quietly if I'd talked to a woman going through something similar. "She's embarrassed," Nancy said. "She feels stupid." "I didn't feel stupid," I replied. "Then how did you feel unaware?" There's a difference. Stupidity implies lack of intelligence. Unawareness implies lack of access. One can be fixed. The other requires conversation. Mark has changed too. Not in grand gestures, in posture. He doesn't lean back in meetings anymore. He leans in. He doesn't say, "I'll handle it." He says, "We'll review it." One evening as we sat on the porch, he spoke quietly. "I've been thinking about my father," he said. "What about him?" "He handled everything. My mom never questioned it." "And you thought that was normal?" "Yes." He paused. "I didn't realize it was incomplete." Incomplete. That word felt accurate, not malicious, not abusive. Incomplete. I looked at him. "You didn't erase me," I said. "You just forgot to include me." He winced slightly. "That sounds worse." "It's honest." He reached for my hand. "I never wanted you to feel replaceable." "I didn't," I said. "I felt removable." That landed. He squeezed my hand once. "I see you," he said. Not a toast, not a speech, just 2 words. And I believed him. Our daughter visited again recently. She sat at the kitchen table while we reviewed a report. She watched quietly. Then she smiled. "This is what partnership looks like," she said. There was no sarcasm in her voice, just approval. That mattered more than I expected. Because the next generation shouldn't inherit our blind spots. They should inherit our corrections. A few weeks ago, Daniel stopped by the house. Not for business. He was invited for dinner. He stood awkwardly on the porch at first. "Feels different being here socially," he said. "It is," I replied. We ate on the patio. At one point, he raised his glass. To transparency, he said lightly. Mark smiled. To better habits, he added. I looked at Daniel. You didn't have to pull me aside that night, I said. He shook his head. Yes, I did. Why? Because I've seen too many women blindsided when it's too late. His voice was calm, not dramatic, just experienced. I'm glad you didn't wait, he added. So am I. If you're listening to this and thinking, it's probably fine, ask anyway. Not because you suspect betrayal. Because you deserve clarity. Love is not diminished by questions. Trust is not threatened by visibility. Partnership is strengthened by structure. I didn't want control. I wanted presence. I didn't need my name first. I needed it there. And if there's one thing I've learned, it's that silence can feel peaceful. But sometimes it hides imbalance. So if this story feels familiar, if you've ever said, he handles that without looking, take a breath. Open the file. Have the conversation. Not to accuse, to include. And if this story gave you something steady to think about, share it with someone who might need that reminder. And consider subscribing for more stories like this. Not loud, not explosive, just honest. Because sometimes the most important changes happen quietly. The end.